Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel Amid Hashem. Today, we will be learning Daf Pei Gimel Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today 3 lines off the bottom of Pei Gimel Amid Aleph, Siman Shin Aleph, Sif Lamed Vav. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Beis Yisrael Hanasunim Batzaru Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziah Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela La'ira Mishibed L'Geula Hashta Bagalo V'Zman Kariv and Emar Amein. Our learning should be a schus for Shalema for Rachel Shava Bas Itel Freda Moshe Ben Esther Fradel Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam Chava Hadassah Bas Rezel Serel Devara Bas Shashabina Rivka Bas Shira Leah. And our learning should be a schus. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol makayim shehem. Okay, so let's get started right away. Siman Shin Aleph, Sin Sif Lamed Vav. 3 lines off the bottom. Pei Gimel Amid Aleph says the Mechaber. Mutter lotzes b'Shabbos b'shnei malbushim zeh al gav zeh. You're allowed to go out on Shabbos wearing 2 articles of clothing, one over the other. And you can do this, says the Mechaber, bein litzarchai, whether you're doing it for your own purposes. You want to wear 2 garments, one on top of the other, bein litzarech chaveroi, or whether you're really doing it to transport it for your friend. You want to bring your friend a shirt, he needs a shirt, so you're going to put on an extra shirt in order to transport the shirt to your friend. Bein shehem shnei chalukim, you could do this with 2 chalukim. A chaluk is a cloak, kind of like a shirt. Bein shehem shnei sarbolim, or 2 sarbolim. What are sarbolim? Says the Rama Pirish sarbol. What's a sarbol? Ksus ha'elyoin. It means an outer garment. So I'm not sure if a sarbol is like a jacket or a sarbol is like a coat. But whatever it is, the sarbol is more of an outer garment, where the chaluk is more of an inner garment. Continues the Mechaber, and he says, Bein shehem shtei chagoros zoi al gav zoi. The Mechaber holds you could wear 2 belts, one on top of the other. Now we're going to see that the Ramah is going to take issue with that. Continues the Mechaber, Va'afilu ein malbush mafsik beinehem. You could wear 1 belt directly on top of another belt, even though you don't have a garment interposing between the 2. The chiddush over here is, when you have a second garment interposing between the first belt, so let's say you have a belt on your pants, okay, so that belt is helping secure your pants. Now you put on some kind of a jacket or a coat, and it's belted. Well, the second belt is serving a different purpose. The second belt is serving the second garment. So to say that you could wear 2 belts when you have a garment that's being mafsik, interposing between the first garment that has a belt, and now there's another garment, and now the second garment has a belt, that we could understand. But the Mechaber is saying even a bigger chiddush. You could put 1 belt directly over your other belt. So you put on your pants, you put a belt through the loops, you secure your pants, now you want to put another belt right on top of that first belt. According to the Mechaber, you're allowed to do that. We're going to see that the Ramah is going to disagree, but first, let's take a look at some Mishnah Berurah over here. Let's turn back to Pei Gimel Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and kof lamed beis. So, you're allowed to wear these 2 garments, and the Mechaber said you could even do this bein litzarech chaveroi, even if you're really putting on the second garment only for the benefit of transporting it to your friend. Bein litzarech chaveroi, af agav she'ein lo shum hana bazeh, even though you're not getting any hana from the second garment whatsoever. You see, if you put on an undershirt, and then you put on your talis cotton, and then you put on your shirt, and then you put on a sweater, you're getting hana from every one of these articles of clothing. But if you put on 2 undershirts because your chaver needs an undershirt, you're not even getting any hana from that second undershirt. But you're allowed to do this anyway. And says the Mishnah Berurah, and we don't even have to worry about an Issa D'Rabbanan over here, that it's going to look like a Masui, like a Maris Ayin. Kevan de Derech Malbushu, because what you're doing is you're wearing it Derech Malbush. Now let's just take a step back for a second. We've read the text of the Mechaber, we've read the text of the Mishnah Berurah. But I think it's kedai just to sort of get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on over here. Let's remember everything that we've discussed since the beginning of Siman Shin Aleph. When we discuss somebody going out on Shabbos wearing something, we always have to determine how do we look at this item that's being worn. What is this? Is this a malbush? Excuse me. Is this a malbush? Is it an article of clothing? Is it a tachshit? Is it an adornment? If it's not a malbush and it's not a tachshit, then it becomes a masui. If it's a masui, is it being carried kederech kol hametzion? Is it being transported and carried in a typical fashion? If so, we're dealing with an issa daraisa. If it's not moitzi kederech kol hametzion, if you're not transporting it in the typical fashion, then it's klachayad. It's being done with a shinoi. Then it is only an issa darabanan. Okay, so those are the kind of the 30,000-foot general rules over here. So now let's take a look at what's going on over here. Somebody is wearing two malbushim. So somebody puts on two shirts. He's wearing two malbushim. Well, a shirt is indisputably a malbush. Okay, so it is factually a malbush. Now, he's wearing it really derech levisha. He's wearing a shirt the way a shirt is worn. Meaning he's putting his arms inside the sleeves. He's buttoning the shirt up. So he's wearing the shirt derech levisha. So you have a malbush, and it's being worn derech levisha. Now, okay, the problem over here is that he's not really wearing the shirt. I don't even want to say in the way the shirt is meant to be worn. The shirt is meant to be worn that way. He's wearing an extra shirt. That's what he's doing. The bottom line is that this is a malbush, and he's wearing it derech levisha, and therefore it certainly cannot be an issa daraisa. Question is there room for an issa darabanan? What would the issa darabanan be? Mechzi kamasui. It looks like you're transporting something outside on Shabbos, and it looks like you're carrying something. So maybe there's room for an issa darabanan. In this case over here, it says to Mishnah Berurah, filu haki lo mechzi kamasui. It's not mechzi kamasui. Why? Came into derech malbushu. Because you're wearing a malbush, you're wearing it derech levisha, it's not mechzi kamasui. So over here it says to Mishnah Berurah, there isn't even an issa darabanan. Now we're going to see cases where there is an issa darabanan. So now let's go weiter. So we have the mechaber. The mechaber said you could wear one garment over the other garment. Then the mechaber said you could even wear two belts. And the mechaber said you could wear two belts even if you don't have a malbush that's mafsik between the two layers. And we explained that that's a bigger chiddush. If you're wearing a belt on your pants and then you put on some kind of you put on a bekisha. I'm wearing a bekisha right now. I'm wearing pants. My pants have a belt. I'm wearing a bekisha, and the bekisha also has a belt. So I'm wearing two chagayros. Yeah, but over there it's very easily understood. The belt is securing the pants. The second belt on the bekisha is securing the bekisha. Says the mechaber even a bigger chiddush. You could wear two belts even when you don't have a malbush mafsik. You could put two belts on the pants. So that's even a bigger chiddush. Now let's take a look at the Ramah, top line, peg gimel amud beis. Says the Ramah, Haga. However, v'yesh oisrim shtei chagayros ze al ze. There are those who prohibit wearing one belt on top of the other. Ela im kein malbush mafsik beinehem, unless it's like the pants and the bekisha, where you have a second malbush that's being mafsik between the first belt and the second belt. You have the first belt on the pants, then you have a bekisha, then you have a second belt on the bekisha. That would be okay. But to take two belts and put them on your pants, says the Ramah, there are those that answer that. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Kuf Lamed Gimel. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'yesh, and by the way, this was brought down from the Arzaruah, Tosfos, and the Mordechai. So we've got heavyweight Rishonim over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, there are those that prohibit the wearing of two belts. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, this would not be comparable to wearing two shirts. There are times that you layer up. So yeah, there are times that you'll put on two undershirts. There are times you'll put on two t-shirts. There are times that you put on two sweaters. There are definitely times that you put on a sweater and then a jacket over the sweater. So when it comes to malbushim, says the Chavetz Chaim, you have to chap what he's saying here. What he's saying is that to wear two articles of clothing, one on top of the other, those are malbushim, and you're wearing them derech levisha. because people do layer up because of the cold. Aval treicha goyros, but two belts. Mahanoyesh. What additional hana is there from wearing two belts? Vein derek lakar. It's not the derek to wear two belts. Who wears two belts? And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, umasoihu, the second belt now becomes a masoi. Now, those are fighting words, right? If you're going to call it a masoi, well, let's remember, if it's not a malbush and it's not a takshit and it's a masoi, you're already treading on Isurei Daraisa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, hold it, take it easy. But he still used those words. He said to the Ramah, when he's saying that the Arzarua, Taisis, the Mordechai, they asked two belts, it's because two shirts, I can understand. It's Derek Levisha, people do it. People do layer up, but two belts? What are you doing with two belts? But, says the Mishnah Berurah, Umashba ba'paiskim, but it is very clearly implied from the paiskim. He brings this down from the Sefer Truma, the Al Yerabah, the Prima Godim. He brings a raya from the Gemara in Eruvin. He brings a raya from Iran. Umashba ba'paiskim, the lekule alma ein isurei element rabbanon. Everybody would agree that even by the two belts, where there doesn't seem to be any additional hana from the second belt would not be an Issa Daraisa, it would only be an Issa Darabanan. Kevan shall call panim derech levishahu, because the bottom line is, you're wearing a belt, which is a malbush, and you're tying it around you, you're buckling it around your body, that's derech levisha. So, in other words, what we have over here so far is like this. The Mechaber said to wear two garments over the other, mutter, it's a malbush, it's derech levisha. And it's something that people do because people layer up because of the cold. So to wear two garments, one over the other, fine, no problem. Said the Mechaber, even two belts. Even two belts when you don't have another garment interposing between belt number one and belt number two. So belt number two seems to be serving no purpose whatsoever. The Mechaber says it's still mutter. Comes along the Ramah brings down from Rishonim that the two belts where there's no garment interposing between belt number one and belt number two, there are those that aser it. Why do they aser it? Because they make a distinction between two belts and two shirts. Two shirts, they say, that's the derech. People layer up. Two belts, nobody layers up belts. There's no additional hana by layering up and putting on a second belt. But is that an Issa Daraisa? Says the Mishnah Berurah, it can't be an Issa Daraisa. It's a malbush and it's derech levisha. So it can't be an Issa Daraisa. So what is it? It's an Issa Darabanan. What's the Issa Darabanan, says the Mishnah Berurah? Ela da Osir, it's Osir Midrabanan, Mishum de Merzi Kemasoi. It's like a Maris Ayin type Isser. People look at you and they're like, you're carrying a belt. Come on. Come on. So now it looks like you're going into Rishos Harabim and you're carrying something. Can't be a Daraisa. It's a Malbush Derech Levisha. But an Issa Darabanan, it is. Now, there are times, by the way, that you do wear two belts. Where the second belt has a distinct purpose. What I'm thinking about right now is not Negeya to Shabbos, really. But you have a police officer, right? He has a belt that's securing his pants. But then he has a second belt. The second belt is, I guess you'd call it the utility belt, right? That's what's holding his gun and his club and his mace and his radio and his extra mags and everything else. So there are times, or a carpenter, right? He wears a second belt, maybe with pockets or with a hook to hold the drill or whatever it is. Anyway, but usually a second belt doesn't accomplish anything. Now, the Mishnah Berurah builds upon what we've said over here. Continues the Mishnah Berurah right by the Ois Cotton Kuf Samach Vav for the Sharat Tzion. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'cholshkein, certainly. Lachgar patzelka al hachagoyra. This is a topic that we've already discussed in the Mishnah Berurah previously. To take a handkerchief and wear it on your belt. So what he means by this is, I think, you're wearing a belt. Now you want to take a patzelka. The patzelka apparently was either the patzelka was a very long belt, or we're talking about somebody over here who has a very enviable, very narrow waist. So somehow the patzelka is long enough that he wants to put the patzelka around him and tie it like a belt. But he's wearing a belt. So he wants to wear a belt on his pants, and now he wants to take a patzelka, a long handkerchief, and he wants to tie that around his belt also. So that's a chagoira on top of a chagoira. But the problem is that the patzelka is not a chagoira. A patzelka is a patzelka. It's a handkerchief. It's not a belt. Says the Mishnah Berurah, "Choshkin lachar patzelka la chagoira dein derech lachar bekach to aser." That would certainly be an issur d'Rabbanan. It's one thing to wear a belt over a belt, which the Ramah doesn't like. It's mechsi kamasui. To wear a patzelka over a belt, that's zicha going to be an issur d'Rabbanan. The patzelka is not a belt. Everyone's going to look at you cute. You figured out a way to try to carry your patzelka. V'achayadam kosav the chayadam writes, the bazeh, to wear the patzelka over the belt, afilu l'der rishayna aser. Even the mechaber, who's willing to be matir a belt over another belt, well, that's because the belt is a malbush and you're wearing it derech levisha. He doesn't want to answer it. But the patzelka? Even the mechaber would answer the patzelka. Forget wearing it in Rishus Harabim Daraisa. Even wearing it in a Carmelis, which is a Rishus Harabim Darabanan, would be aser. Ubetaz. Ubetaz Sivkat Yodal Nasan Eitza. The Taz gives you an Eitza for how you could transport your patzelka. And we've seen this already before. You take the patzelka and you fasten it to one end of the belt using a slip knot, so that you don't have a problem of tying a kesher shel kayama on Shabbos. Now you know what it looks like. Now it's not, oh look, this guy, he wants to carry his handkerchief, he tied it around his waist. No, his belt was too short. He needed to lengthen his belt. So he took a patzelka and he fastened it to one end of the belt, and using that, he extended his belt. Well, that already is not, wow, look, he's carrying his handkerchief. No, nebuch, his belt was too short. V'yak gagam pa patzelka. That's the Taz. Says the Mishnah Berurah, really what you could do is take the patzelka and use the patzelka as a second belt when you have a garment interposing between belt number 1 and belt number 2. If you're wearing a belt on your coat or on your bekisha, if you have a belt on your bekisha, so yachkarena alamit nesayim. So use this long patzelka as the belt on your pants. Don't wear your regular belt on your pants. Use your patzelka as the belt on your pants, then put on your bekisha and belt your bekisha. I will also likshar samit pacha saviv regel. One thing the Mishnah Berurah says you certainly cannot do is to take a small handkerchief. I think that's the difference between a patzelka and a mitpakas. The patzelka is long, the mitpakas is short. To take a traditional handkerchief and tie it around your ankle, that you certainly cannot do, says the Mishnah Berurah. That's b'chlal not derech levisha. Nobody takes things and ties them around the belt. So maybe a woman uses a, there's a name for it, the bracelet that goes on the anklet. Anklet? I'm not sure if it's called an anklet. Might be called an anklet. I'm not sure. But certainly nobody takes a handkerchief and ties it around their ankle. That's not derech levisha at all. Elayasa kanal, oy yichrech oisa saviv hatzavar b'derech malbush. Or take the handkerchief and tie it around your neck b'derech malbush. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that means. He's bringing it down from the Chayadam, exactly what it means to tie the handkerchief around your neck b'derech malbush. But I will tell you this. I knew somebody, it's a funny thing. People my generation, certainly under my generation, don't even know what a handkerchief is for, right? We use disposable tissues. The previous generation, my father didn't know from disposable tissues. My father knew from handkerchiefs. So a handkerchief was a necessity. You didn't go to shul and expect to find, and indeed, when I was a kid, there weren't boxes. I davened in the Svarsh Shul in Borough Park downstairs at the 830 Minyan. There weren't boxes of tissues all over the shul. When you needed a tissue, you didn't have a tissue, you had to go out maybe to the lobby and find a paper towel. Once they started using paper towels and they stopped using the long towel on the stick that you pull. Everybody had handkerchiefs. So I knew somebody who went out with a handkerchief every Shabbos. What he did was, he turned up, my beard is in the way, but I'll turn to the side. He turned up his collar, like I have here. Turned up his collar. He took his handkerchief. He twisted his handkerchief. He tied it around his collar, kind of like a tie, right? He tied it around his collar. And then he tied the handkerchief, and he used the handkerchief kind of to close up the top of his shirt. Problem with that is that then he wore a tie. So, I don't know, Chagara al Gabi Chagara? Is it really serving a purpose? Is it really derech levisha? I don't know. I mean, this is a chayodam. But you have to know what the facts on the ground were, what the derech was in the days of the chayodam. Maybe people didn't wear ties. And if they didn't wear ties, maybe there was taka very much a purpose to that patzelka tied around the neck to close up the top of the shirt. You could see that if you're not wearing a tie, right? Maybe that was the derech, that they used something to close up the top of the shirt, especially in the cold weather. So then maybe that's where the chayodam is coming from, to use the patzelka to close up the top of the shirt. Okay, Kof Lamed Daled. So the Ramah said there are those that aser the chagara zeh al zeh. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Vehecha shenaygen lachgar untergartel v'ibergartel, where the derech is to wear two belts. There's an untergartel, an inner belt, and an ibergartel, and then there's an outer belt. Dahainu, what's going on over here? Hatachtain ein noeh. First, they put on a very utilitarian belt. So maybe they had a good, strong, full grain leather, utilitarian belt that you could have for 30 years. And you put it on and you got a good belt, but it's not pretty. And then they had an outer belt, v'hasheni noeh. The second belt was not a utilitarian belt. The second belt was a decorative belt. And maybe it was made out of a nice soft fabric, a delicate fabric. Maybe it had embellishments on it. But that's not a utilitarian belt. You can't make it nice and tight. You can't. So they would put on first their full grain leather utilitarian belt, which is ugly, or at least not pretty. Then they would put on a beautiful embellished Shabbos belt over that. So if that's the derech, says the Mishnah Berurah, and they're doing this for a purpose. There's a reason why they're putting the second belt over the first belt. Or maybe another reason. Maybe the top belt is not really long enough. It's really a little bit too short, and you can manage to close it. But the underbelt, that's a good long belt. So then shari, in other words, if you're doing a derech levisha, and this is the derech, and it's normal, and there's a purpose, so then this whole question is not germane. And he brings this down for the Pri Begad. And the Chayodam also takes the position. There's no reason to object to people who do this in regions where this is normal. The Achrayim write. This habit, this derech that some women have, that they wear a belt by their waist. So a woman is wearing a dress, and she's wearing a skirt, and she puts a belt by her waist. So that's a regular functional belt that she's belting by her waist. Then she's got a long dress or a long skirt that's also wide. And now, lower down on her body, she wants to put a second belt. And that belt is going to cinch the dress or the skirt lower down on her body. Now, why is she doing this? So the Mishnah Berurah says there's a reason why they did this. By cinching the dress or the skirt lower down and gathering it in, it sounds like it's a wide dress or a wide skirt, by cinching it and gathering it in, you're also having the effect of shortening it. When you pull it together, you also pull it up a little bit. And they do this, they did this when they had to walk out in the Rishus Harabim where the roads were muddy. So by doing this, it elevated the hem of the skirt or the dress somewhat off the ground so that they shouldn't get dirty. Gam kein shari, that would also be mutter. So basically, what we're coming down with over here is anywhere that the second belt is serving a distinct purpose as a malbush, if it's decorative or it's longer or you need it to raise up the garment, anytime the second belt is performing a distinct function, then this whole question of a second belt is not germane. You're wearing a malbush, you're wearing a derech levisha, you're doing it for a distinct purpose. There's no issue. The problem is when you're wearing a second belt for no apparent reason. Then there's room for this d'Rabbanan of Mersi Kemasui. Says, I don't think we read this actually in the Mechaber, in the Ramah. Let's just go down to the second line in the Shulchan Aruch by the Ois Kat and Kuf Lam and Hey for the Mishnah Berurah, where the Ramah says, V'chein roi linhoig, we should be noig like the Chumrah of the Ramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'chein roi linhoig, al kein shlof mantel. A shlof mantel sounds very much like a nightgown. Shetafar by hemyana. So it's a nightgown, a night dress, and it has a belt attached to it. Im roitze lachgar chagora al hashlof mantel. For some reason, you want to put on another belt. So the shlof mantel has a belt that's attached to it. You want to put on another belt. Now, why? He doesn't say. So, again, we don't know what the facts on the grounds were. I never saw shlof mantel. Again, it sounds like a nightgown. Even men wore like what we would call a nightgown, like a nightshirt. Okay, you want to put it in a male, categorize it as a male garment, we'll call it a nightshirt. Okay, but it's basically a long cloak. So if it had a belt tied to it, but you want to put on a second belt, me'ezatam sheyeh, says the Mishnah Berurah, now that the Ramah says that we should be noyig l'chumra, so what you're doing essentially is you're putting a chagora on a chagora, and there's no beged being mafsik between the first belt and the second belt. So just to make it clear, if you have a nightgown and the nightgown has a belt attached to it, and now you want to put on a robe over the nightgown and the robe also has a belt, that's no problem. The robe is being mafsik between belt number 1 on the nightgown and belt number 2 on the robe. But if you want to go out in the nightshirt or the nightgown and it has a belt attached to it, if for some reason you want to throw on a second belt, now you're putting on a second belt over a first belt with no interposition. And the Ramah says we should be machmir not to do that. Says the Mishnah, how do you get away with it? Yatir hem yoinoi hatafar boy. Don't tie the belt that's attached to the nightgown. Let that belt hang loose. Don't tie it. And put on your second belt. And tie your second belt. Now again, why you're doing this, I have no idea. But whatever it is, that's the scenario that the Mishnah Berurah is giving us. Now, you might wonder, hold it. If I don't tie the first belt, the one that's fastened to the nightgown, so now is that a masui? Does that mean that I'm carrying it? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Umikamakam le have a masui. It's not a masui. The bottle hula beged acharei shetafar boy. It is bottled to the nightgown because it's attached to the nightgown. Ukitela el b'sif chav gimel, which we learned in the very, very complex sif chav gimel earlier in Siman Shin Aleph. Whenever you have something that is functional and something that is the derech, and it is stitched and attached to a beged, it is bottled to the beged, and it becomes part of the malbush, and you're allowed to wear it. So the belt, it's stitched to the nightgown. Even if it's hanging loose, it's stitched to the nightgown. So it's bottled to the nightgown, and it's not a masui. Masha ain't kenim yachkar b'shneim, but if you're going to tie the belt of the nightgown and then put on another belt on top of it, have yachagayra kamasui. So now the second beged becomes this isid d'Rabbanan masui of a chagayra ala chagayra. He brings this down from the Pri Megadim. Let's close out Sif Lamed Vav, second line down in the Shulchan Aruch near the end of the line, the words of the Ramah. Umuter lilbay shnei kayva'im ze al zeh. You're allowed to wear 2 hats, one on top of the other. V'chein shnei an pila'os. And you're also allowed to wear 2 layers of socks, one sock on top of another sock. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cotton koflam above shnei kayvam, you could wear 2 hats, shekain darka b'choil, because that is the derech during the week. Lasam kayva gadol al gabi kayva cotton, to put a large hat on top of a small hat. He brings this down from the Arzarua. Now, this does not mean that you could go out with 2 up hats on Shabbos, one up hat on top of the second up hat. This means that you could put on an up hat on top of a yarmulke, or even a bigger, like I'm thinking in my mind right now, most of you are not going to know what this means. I'm thinking of what we fondly remember as a Rosh Yeshiva couple, which we saw Rav Moshe Zechariah V'Kodesh L'Vracha wear all the time. Any of you who are familiar with old pictures of Rav Moshe Zatzal, Rav Shach Zatzal, I can't, it's not coming to my mind anybody else. Rab Aaron? No, Rab Aaron, the pictures of Rab Aaron, usually he's wearing a regular yarmulke. There is Shiva Zatzal, Rav Shach. I don't remember who else I've seen it by. It's a couple. It's like a high square. It was made out of like a silk. It folded flat, then you unfolded it and put it on your head, and it came up. So that's more of a hat. Now you want to put an up hat on top of that. So that's a hat on top of a hat. It's a big hat on top of a small hat. That's exactly what the Mishnah Berurah says. And that was the derech. It was the derech to wear a big hat on top of a small hat. And therefore, you're wearing a malbush, and you're wearing a ketarkoi. To go out in Rosh Hashanah wearing your Stetson on top of another Stetson, or your up hat on top of another up hat, that's going to entail several problems. First of all, we would have to be afraid that someone's going to make fun of you, and because someone's going to make fun of you, you're going to take it off and you might come to carry Talanamas to Rosh Hashanah. Also, it's certainly not Derech Levisha, so it's a Malbush, but it's not Derech Levisha. Over there's too much room for Isurei D'Rabbanan. But to wear a big hat on top of a small hat, that's the Derech, that is okay. Ice cut and kuf lamed zayin, the cage stay on pilois, 2 layers of socks. I'll call regel, to wear 2 socks on each foot, that's okay. Tevikish ne sarbolim. That's like wearing 2 sweaters, or like wearing 2 coats. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, Sef Lamed Zayin, 3rd line down in the Shulchan Aruch, middle of the line, says the Mechaber. Motor lotzeis b'Shabbos v'bata yadayim anikram guntish. You could go out wearing gloves into Rosh Hashanah. However, says the Mechaber, v'yesh bi shemachmir lahatzrich. There are those that are machmir to require sheyitferem me'erev Shabbos b'bata yadayim shamabushav, that the gloves should be stitched to the sleeves of your coat. Or they should at least be tied to the sleeves of the coat using a kesha shel kayama, a permanent knot, yofeh. They should be tied well. And says the Mechaber, v'roi lochish lidvarav, you should be concerned for that opinion. So first the Mechaber says it's mutter to wear gloves. Then the Mechaber brings down a shita, shibali aleket, in the name of the Agur, that there are those that are machmir and say, no, you should not go out to Rosh Hashanah with gloves unless the gloves are either stitched firmly to the sleeves of the coat or at least tied with a kesha shel kayama. Let's take a look at what's at work over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut and kuf labeches b'bata yadayim. Okay, first, vahatam. Why is this mutter? Says the Mishnah Berurah, shehem malbush gomer. Why not? In other words, the starting perspective over here should be, why is there even a shaila on wearing gloves? A glove is a bona fide malbush. What's a malbush? It conceals the body, it protects the body. What's a glove? Says the Mishnah Berurah, vatam shehem malbush gomer, shasli lahagim mipnei hakar. You wear gloves to protect you from the cold. So a glove is an absolute bona fide malbush. So you're allowed to wear it outside on Shabbos. Okay, so what are these machmirim? Sometimes you need the feel of your fingers. Kina, the Chavetz Chaim says, we have to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom that we don't have this nowadays. We read this and it looks to us like strange. Back in the day, it wasn't strange. It doesn't have to be that it's strange. The Rebbeinu Shalom did us a tremendous tova that to us it's strange. Says the Chavetz Chaim, sometimes you have to take a lice off of you. Or some kind of an insect, a mosquito that's biting you. So sometimes you need the feeling of your fingertips. And therefore we must be concerned, Shema Yishkach, maybe you'll forget, and you'll take off your glove, and now you'll come to walk down Amos in Rosh Hashanah. So again, really the Hashkafa Rishona of gloves, says the Mishnah Berurah, is exactly the Dea Rishona of the Mechaber. It's a bona fide malbush. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be able to wear it on Shabbos. The Yesh Misha Machmir are worried about room for an Issa D'Rabbanan, for a Gzera, We know that there are a lot of things that Chazal asered because they're afraid you might come to take them off and carry them Daled Amos Rishus Harabim. Well, gloves would seem to be a very good example of that. There would seem to be a lot of room for Gzeira that you need the feeling of your fingertips, and you might come to take off your glove and carry it Daled Amos in Rishus Harabim. So that is the Yesh Machmirim. Now, the Yesh Machmirim gave an Eitzah. The eights of the Yesh Machmirim was stitch them to the sleeves of your coat or tie them to your coat with a Kesher Shakayama. Now we're going to have to see what that accomplishes. But in the meantime, let's go weiter in the Mishnah Berurah. He's cut Kov Lamed Tes and Ikram Guntish. He says that these gloves are what we call Guntish. Zui Masha Anu Karech Henchich, says the Chavetz Chaim. The Mechaber says that in his days they were called Guntish. Says the Chavetz Chaim, in my time they're called Henchich. Henchich kind of sounds like hand slippers or hand shoes. So you can see where that would be gloves. So I would say, Zuhi Masha Anu Kairin, gloves. Ava, Masha Anu Kairin Arbil. But how about, says the Chavetz Chaim, what we call an Arbil? What's an Arbil? Shetoichiv by Shtei Yodov. This is something that you put both of your hands into. That's what we call in English a muff. Maybe look up a picture, an image of a muff. What's a muff? A muff was a round thing, maybe made out of fur or a heavy fabric, and it's open on both ends, kind of like a sleeve, a tube. And you put both of your hands into it, and you walk with it like this. So you walk with your hands like this, and your hands are both inserted into this nice, warm, insulated muff. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what's the din with that? The Taz says that that's even better than gloves. Why is it even better than gloves? Because, says the Taz, what's the whole potential problem with the gloves? The potential problem with the glove is you're going to need your hand, so you're going to take your glove off. Now you're going to come to carry the glove Daled Amos in Rishus Harabim. Says the Taz, the Arbil, the muff, doesn't have that problem. Because you need to pull a kina off of your body, fine, you'll take one hand out of the muff. But the muff is still on the other hand. So you'll walk Daled Amos. So what? The muff is still lavush. You're still wearing the muff on your other hand. So the Taz says that the muff is more kuladik than the gloves. You're still wearing it on the second hand, even if you take one out. And therefore it wouldn't be called a masui. V'yesh disvir lehu, but there are those, and he brings this down in the Shar Tzion from the Mabusha Yom Tov and the Eliyah Rabbah. V'yesh disvir lehu the Adarabah. There are those that hold fakert. Zeh chaber tvei. There are those that hold that the muff is worse than the gloves. Shebekal neifel miyadai, because a glove is on your hand, right? It fits like a glove. You put your hand into the glove. The muff is just a tube that you insert your hands into. Very easy for it to fall off. You might come to carry it 4 hours. And also, apparently, these Mandiyamrim say that a muff was sometimes just carried. It wasn't unusual for somebody to just carry a muff. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, once we see that the Mechaber said that we should be machmir on the gloves, so certainly Roy Lachush Kam Bazet, the Pri Megadim says we should also be machmir when it comes to the muff. Now, what was the eitzah that the Mechaber gave about the gloves? You should stitch them or tie them to your sleeves. Very courts and sharp Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, you know what the eitzah of stitching it or tying it to your coat sleeves is? Oh, once you stitch it or tie it to your coat sleeves, we don't have to worry that you're going to come carry it Daled Amos in Rishus Harabim. Yeah, but l'chayr is a very basic question. You're stitching your gloves to your coat sleeves. That's not called a masui? Let's remember what we learned. Again, back in that very complex Sif Chav Gimel. You could go out with your garment with your decorative buttons sewn onto your garment because that becomes buttle to the garment, right? Because it's decorative to the garment. It's serving the garment. It's buttled to the garment. You could go out with other type of embellishments attached to your garment. Gloves? Gloves are a davar chashuv in their own right. They are their own malbish. And they're stitched to the coat. They're not serving the coat. They're not part of the coat. So how are they bottled to the coat? And if they're not bottled to the coat, how are you allowed to go out with them stitched to your coat? L'chayra now, it's a masui. It's a bomb kasha. And the Chavetz Chaim is going to tackle this. He tackles it in the Biur Halacha that we'll see in a moment. What's a pella to me is that he was so quiet about it in the Mishnah Berurah, and he didn't even say ayin Biur Halacha. Now, I could only guess why the Chavetz Chaim HaKadosh decided to. When I say these kind of things, you should know, Rabbi Isai, you can't see it on my camera because it's on the other side of the camera. I have a picture of the Chavetz Chaim, that famous picture of the Chavetz Chaim that became famous several years ago. The Chavetz Chaim walking, whether it was to the Knessia Gedolah or whatever it was, the Chavetz Chaim walking in the street surrounded by people. I keep that picture on my wall because when I see something and I question what's going on, I look at the Chavetz Chaim. It's a very frightening picture to me that I'm saying his Torah all the time. It's very frightening to me. But in any case, I can only hazard a guess why the Chavetz Chaim did this, and that could be that in his day and age, especially in his locale, where I imagine it was very, very cold during the winter, everybody wore gloves, and therefore the Chavetz Chaim wanted to be very circumspect, kind of. He wanted to make it very clear. Okay, fine, we have 2 days in the Mechaber. The first day in the Mechaber is that the gloves are 100% mutter. The second day is a chumrah, that you should attach them to your coat. Okay, v'roi lachush l'dvara, fine. Everybody go ahead and stitch your gloves to your sleeves or tie them to your sleeves with a kesher shakayama, and then let's move on to Siflam and Ches. And he didn't want to come now and start questioning, wait a second, why does that work? So he tackled it because Tayrihi ulalamdai anitzarich. We have to learn it. We have to understand it. So he tackled it in the Biur Halacha. But he didn't even write in the Mishnah Berurah in Biur Halacha. He just tackled it in the Biur Halacha. Having said that, we'll see it in a moment. Let's just first do Mishnah Berurah's Cut and Kuf Mem Aleph, the last Mishnah Berurah here on this Sif. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'roi lachush l'dvarav. And says the Mishnah Berurah, what I just said, V'akshav no'ag u'lahakal. You should know nowadays we're noig to be makel, says the Mishnah Berurah. Brings out a Bach, a Magen Avram, that we're noig to be makel on the gloves. We're not even noig to tie it to the coat. Our Rishus Harabims are not really Rishus Harabims. Our Rishus Harabims are probably really Carmelism, so it's not really a Rishus Harabim Daraisa. So because of that, the Nigzer Dum Hasil Asuye. Again, the whole thing is a possible list of Rabbanon Xerisha that you might come to carry Talamas and Rishus Harabim. Well, we don't really have a real Rishus Harabim anyway. Well, Mashma B'divrei Achrayim, it's applied from the Achrayim. Da'av she'ein limchais biyadim akilin. Certainly, you shouldn't object to those that are mekel. Mikamokom roy l'chol bal nefesh lahachmir. Still, the Chavetz Chaim says a bal nefesh should be machmir, and he should sew them or tie them to his sleeves. Now, let's take a look here at the Biur Halacha. Dibra maschil sheyitfereim. So here, my sound got knocked off for a second, but now I don't think we lost anything. I'll check it before I post the share, but I don't think I lost any sound. I think I caught it the instant that it happened. In case you're curious, what happened is the corner of my Mishnah Berurah over here knocked into the finicky plug at the base of the mic, and Baruch Hashem, it caught my eye. There are lights on the mic and there are lights on my screen. I don't always catch it. Baruch Hashem, I caught it. Okay, fine. Thank you, Rabbi Shalom. Siyata D'Shmaya. Okay. Says the Biur Halacha. Sheyitferei Moshe Yiksherei behem b'kesher shakayama. The Eitzah of the Mechaber, how to deal with the Yesh Machmirim, that we don't want you going out with the gloves. Why? Because you might come to carry them. What's the Eitzah? Stitch them or tie them to your clothing. Says the Biur Halacha. Ayin B'taz. Take a look at the Taz. Shehiksha, who asks the Kasha. Tekeshia Tluyam Ayidei Kesher, if they're hanging because you tied them onto your coat. But you're not wearing them on your hands, okay? So we see school kids. I mean, I know I did this with my school kids because otherwise I went through 300 pairs of gloves a winter, a new pair of gloves for each kid every day. we would attach the gloves, or they make these elastics. My wife would stitch elastic to a long piece of elastic, one end to one glove, one end to the other glove, and then thread it through the sleeves of the coat. So when they're not wearing their gloves, so you have the coat and the gloves are hanging. Now that's not what we're talking about over here. Over here, what we're talking about is taking a string or a piece of fabric and tying it to the coat and tying it to the glove. If you're not wearing the glove, so now the glove is hanging from the coat. Asks the Kaz, I don't understand. So if you do that, because you tluyim al yedei kesher, if they're hanging from the coat with something that's tied to the coat, v'lo yiu al yadai, and it's not on his hands, harei yesh masui alav. So then the glove is a masui. Uma yoyeloi b'mashu kosher. What does it help that you tied it to the coat? The havadei lo bottle agabi debeged. The glove is a choshev a malbish in its own right. It's not bottled to the coat because you tied it to the coat. So what did you accomplish by tying it to the coat? If you're wearing it on your hand, so fine. So you're wearing a malbush, derech levisha, you're allowed to go out. But now you take it off your hand and you let it hang from the coat. Now it's a masui. So what did you accomplish? How is this mutter? Uma yoyeloi b'mashu kosher. Yeah. Ubebira gra hiksha b'yoyser mizeh. The gra asks an even bigger kasha. Tafilu tfira my mahani. The Taz is only asking the kasha on 1/8 of the mechaber. The mechaber's first 1/8 that the mechaber had was tie it to the coat. The other 8 was sew it to the coat. Sew it to the coat sounds more chazak, right? Your mamish tying it to the coat. Your mamish trying to make it part of the coat. Asks the gra, what are you accomplishing by sewing it to the coat? You don't accomplish anything by sewing it to the coat. We're going to see in the next share of Yirtzeh Hashem, somebody goes out with a talus, and the tzitzits are not kosher. So you're going out with a talus that has tzitzits on it, but the tzitzits are puzzle. So you've got two problems here. One is a hilchas tzitzits problem, chelik aleph. Then there's a chelik gimel problem, and that is if the tzitzits are kosher, so then the tzitzits are being mesakin the beged, they're fixing the beged, so then the tzitzits are serving a purpose to the beged, so then I understand that the tzitzits are bottled to the beged, they're part of the beged, they're not a masui. But if the tzitzits aren't kosher, so then the tzitzits are not being mesakin the beged, they're not serving the beged, so then they're a masui. And the tzitzits are choshev. You see, if the tzitzits weren't choshev, so then they would be bottled to the beged. But they are choshev. Why are they choshev? Because you're going to fix the tzitzits. You're not going to throw the tzitzits out. You're going to fix them. So they're choshev. So they're choshev. They're not serving the beged, so they're not bottled to the beged. Asks the gra, what's going on over here by the gloves? You're going to sew the gloves to the beged. Big deal. It's like the tzitzits. They're choshev. They're gloves. They're a choshev a malbush. They're not serving the beged, so they're not bottled to the beged. So they're a masui. So what's going on over here? It's a bomb kasha. Now you can understand why it bothers me. Why did the Chavetz Chaim at least say ayin bir halacha? Clearly, he wanted to stay away from this. Those who know. Those who are doing what we do, right? You want to learn it, so you'll look at the bir halacha. But if not, it's there. It's on the page. You know, you'll ayin sham. Look there. It's nachas. You'll find nachas. If you don't look, you won't find nachas. But l'chayr, it's a bomb kasha. So now skip a few lines, and we'll see a couple of possible answers here. So v'oid v'isi b'sefer nahar shalom v'chebet sefer shabbos shekasu were right. Da'afa yidik shira b'vadei ein a bottle gabi aboti yadayim. Even though you're right that by tying it to the sleeves of the coat, the gloves are definitely not bottled to the coat. We understand that. Mikol makom, nevertheless, ha le'es ata lavish behem derech malbush. Let's. The Taisa Shabbos, the Nahar Shalom, they look at this really like a poisik. And they say, let's take a hard look at what's going on over here, okay? You're going to go out to the Rosh Hashanah, you're wearing a coat. The coat has gloves that are tied to it, or gloves that are stitched to it. Your plan is not to go out wearing the coat that way. You're going out wearing the gloves. So right now, is there any shiloh? As you meet this guy on the street, you look at him, he's wearing gloves, his gloves are tied to the sleeves of his coat, or they're stitched to the sleeves of his coat. Are you going to look at him and say, how could you go out like that? The gloves are a masli. No, the gloves are a malbush. So right now there's no shiloh. Right now everything is fine. V'rak mishum chshasha. The only problem over here is that we have a chshash. What's the chshash? Teshema yitztarek la'asirem v'yaviyim biyad. The whole problem, when we see Yankel walking down the street wearing gloves on Shabbos, is that there's room for an Issa D'Rabbanan, for a Gzeira, for a Kshash, you might come to take the glove off, and you might come to carry it down Lamas and Rishus Harabim. Says the Harshalom, the Tosefes Shabbos, the Kevin Shehem Kshurim. Now, let's say that does happen. Let's say he does have to flick a mosquito off him or whatever it is. So now he's taka going to take the glove off. And now let's say he taka walks Dalet Amos and Rishus Harabim. Afim yoytzi yonamihem. First of all, when he takes the glove off, lo yiplu legamri. The glove is not going to fall on the floor, right? The glove is going to hang from his coat. So do we have to worry that he's going to drop the glove, pick up the glove and carry it? No, he can't drop the glove. The glove is attached to his coat. So it's not going to fall on the floor. That we have to be choshed is going to carry it, right? So in other words, what he's saying is like this. Again, let's look at this. While he's wearing the glove, zero problem. It's a bona fide malbush. It's 100% mutter. He's wearing a malbush derech levisha outside of Shabbos, no problem. Okay, so now we want to start having chashashos. We want to start worrying about what might happen. Okay, so let's take the worst case scenario. Do we have to worry that he's going to drop the glove, pick it up and carry it to Alamis and Rishus Harabim, holding it in his hand? No. Why? Because he can't drop the glove. The glove is attached to his coat. So that we don't have to worry about. Okay, so what are you worried about? So the only thing you could worry is that he's going to take off the glove, let it hang from his coat, and he's not going to put the glove back on. And he's going to walk down Amos and Rishus Harabim with the glove hanging from the coat. Okay, let's say he does that. Rakshi Tluyadalav. Ooh, heavy shaloi kederech chaytzo potter. That would be not moitzi kederech kalamitzian. Is that the way you carry gloves when you want to carry gloves? When you want to carry gloves outside of the street, do you carry them by sewing them to your coat? No, that's not the normal way to carry gloves. So even if he takes the glove off and he lets it hang from his coat and he walks down Amos and Rishus Harabim that way, was he moitzi it kederech kalamitzian? No. Therefore, says the Harshalom and the Tosefes Shabbos, a gzeira like that we're not going to make. In other words, a gzeira to say that we're afraid that you might take the glove off, and then you might walk down Amos and Rishus Harabim and be moitzi et shaloi kederech hametzian, which is an issa d'Rabbanan, so we should make a gzeira to prevent that. That would be like a classic gzeira l'gzeira. So that gzeira we're not going to make, and therefore this would be mutter. We'll stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. You should look at the rest of the Spir Halach. It's very interesting. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klai for all the Ranshim should send Yeshuas, Refuas, Parnasa, Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Biaska El Tzedek, B'meher v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.